Bone cracked against freezing marble. Warm blood rapidly pooled around a ruined anniversary gown. Above, a husband stood breathless, his arm still outstretched. Beside him smirked a treacherous stepsister, clutching his shirt with fake tears in her eyes. As darkness pulled closer, heavy oak doors smashed open. A man dropped to his knees, screaming Victoria's name with a shattered voice. It wasn't her husband. It was Arthur, his ruthless, estranged older brother. Blinking once, copper scent vanished, replaced by crisp champagne aroma. Rebirth had begun. The pain didn't fade immediately. Even as I stood in the middle of the dazzling ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria, my fingertips trembling against the stem of a crystal champagne flute, phantom agony radiated through my skull. I sucked in a jagged breath, the air burning my lungs. I squeezed my eyes shut, expecting to see the crimson stain spreading across the imported Italian marble of my foyer. Instead, I opened them to the sight of a massive crystal chandelier, casting a warm golden glow over hundreds of New York's elite. The string quartet in the corner was playing a soft rendition of a Bach cello suite. It was December 14th, exactly 3 years ago. My mind spun as the memories of my previous life crashed into me like a tidal wave. I remembered the blinding devotion I had for Liam Harrington. I remembered handing over the Bennett family's controlling shares to him, trusting his boyish smile and promises of expanding our corporate empire. I remembered the late nights he spent at the office, which I later discovered were spent in the bed of my stepsister, Olivia Mercer. And I remembered the end. I had found the offshore bank statements. Liam had been systematically draining the Bennett Trust into a shell corporation registered in the Caymans. When I confronted him at our 3rd anniversary dinner, Olivia had stepped out of the shadows of my own home wearing my mother's vintage diamond necklace. The argument had been vicious. Liam's mask of the perfect loving husband had melted away, revealing a sneering, desperate coward. "You were just a stepping stone, Victoria," he had spat right before he lunged at me. The fall down the sweeping staircase had broken my neck. But the final image etched into my dying brain wasn't Liam's relieved face. It was the violent crash of the front doors bursting open. It was Arthur Harrington. Arthur, Liam's older brother, the cold, ruthless, and universally feared black sheep of the Harrington family. The man who had been exiled to the London branch because his mere presence threatened Liam's ascension to CEO. Arthur and I had barely spoken 10 words to each other in our lives. Yet in my final fading seconds, he had thrown himself onto the blood-soaked floor. His usually immaculate suit ruined his icy eyes wide with a devastation so raw it terrified me. He had pulled my broken body into his chest, roaring for an ambulance, his tears mixing with my blood. Why did the man who supposedly despised our entire family cry for me? Victoria Earth to Victoria. A gentle manicured hand waved in front of my face, snapping me violently back to the present. I turned my head. Olivia. She was wearing a stunning emerald silk dress, bought with my father's money, no doubt. Her eyes, framed by innocent fluttering lashes, held that secret mocking glint I had been too blind to see the first time around. "You're spacing out," Olivia giggled, linking her arm through mine. "You should be paying attention. Tonight is going to be very special for you." I stared at her. The urge to wrap my hands around her throat was so powerful, my vision literally tinted red. But I forced my muscles to relax. I took a slow sip of my champagne. Tonight, the annual Harrington Bennett Winter Gala. In my past life, this was the exact night Liam dropped to one knee in front of 300 influential guests and asked me to marry him. I had wept tears of joy and said yes, sealing my own death warrant. I kept my voice eerily calm, devoid of the bubbly excitement I had shown in the past. What makes you say that, Olivia? She blinked momentarily, thrown off by my frigid tone. Oh, Liam has been planning something big. He loves you so much, Victoria. He loves the Bennett shares. I thought, my heart turning to absolute ice. A sudden hush fell over the ballroom. The string quartet stopped playing. The heavy velvet curtains near the grand staircase parted, and there he was, Liam Harrington. He looked like a prince out of a fairy tale in his bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo. His golden brown hair perfectly styled his smile, radiant and disarming. The crowd parted for him as he walked directly toward me. My heart didn't flutter, it recoiled. I saw the subtle, almost imperceptible glance he shot Olivia, a silent confirmation between two snakes. Then his eyes locked onto mine, brimming with manufactured adoration. This was it, the moment my life had ended the first time. But I wasn't the naive, lovesick Victoria Bennett anymore. I was a ghost who had clawed her way back from hell, and I was going to burn his entire world to the ground. Liam stopped 2 feet in front of me. The entire ballroom was dead silent, every eye fixed on us. I could see my father, Robert Bennett, beaming with pride near the front. I could see Liam's mother, Beatrice, dabbing her dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, ready to welcome the Bennett fortune into her family's grasp. Victoria Liam began, his voice amplified by the sheer acoustics of the room. He reached out and took my free hand. His skin felt like acid against mine, but I didn't pull away. Not yet. From the moment we met, you have been the light of my life. You are brilliant, beautiful, and the only woman I could ever see myself standing beside for the rest of my days. He reached into his breast pocket and produced a velvet box. He sank gracefully to one knee, flipping the box open to reveal a flawless 3-carat Cartier diamond ring. Gasps of delight rippled through the crowd. Olivia, standing just over my shoulder, let out a perfectly timed sigh of admiration. Victoria Bennett, will you do me the absolute honor of becoming my wife? In my past life, I had immediately dropped to my knees with him, throwing my arms around his neck. In this life, I stood perfectly still. I looked down at him, really looking at the pathetic, greedy creature hiding behind that handsome face. I let the silence stretch. 1 second, 3 seconds, 5 seconds. The smiles in the crowd began to falter. Liam's confident grin twitched at the corners. Victoria, he whispered, a hint of genuine confusion bleeding through his veneer. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled my hand out of his grasp. No, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in that silent room, it cracked like a whip. Liam froze. What? I said no, Liam. I repeated my tone, as casual as if I were declining a second cup of coffee. I looked up from him, letting my gaze drift to Olivia, who was staring at me with her jaw unhinged. I think it would be incredibly selfish of me to accept this ring. Selfish. Liam stammered, his face flushing crimson as he scrambled to his feet. Victoria, what are you talking about? Is this a joke? It's not a joke, I said, projecting my voice so the surrounding guests could hear perfectly. It would be selfish to stand in the way of true love. I've seen the way you look at my stepsister. I've noticed the late-night texts, the lingering touches. I wouldn't dream of trapping you in a loveless marriage of corporate convenience when your heart clearly belongs to Olivia. Pandemonium. The ballroom erupted in a cacophony of shocked gasps and furious whispers. My father stepped forward, his face purple with rage, though it was unclear if he was angry at me or Liam. Beatrice Harrington let out a dramatic high-pitched shriek. Liam looked like he had been struck by lightning. "Victoria, you're insane, I don't..." "Olivia and I are just..." "Please, Liam," I cut him off smoothly, raising a hand. "Don't humiliate yourself further. Keep the ring. Give it to her. I wish you both nothing but the absolute best." Without waiting for a response, I turned my back on him. The sheer power of that single motion sent a shockwave of adrenaline through my veins. I walked through the parted crowd, my head held high, ignoring the frantic calls of my name. I didn't stop until I reached the heavy mahogany doors leading to the private terrace. I pushed them open and stepped out into the biting December cold. The air hit my face, shocking my system, reminding me that I was truly alive. That was surgically precise. The deep, gravelly baritone emerged from the shadows of the terrace. I spun around. Leaning against the stone balustrade, a lit cigar resting between his fingers, was Arthur Harrington. He was taller than Liam Broader, with a dangerous predatory grace that commanded the space around him. He wore a stark black suit with no tie, the collar of his crisp white shirt unbuttoned. His face was a masterpiece of sharp angles and cold shadows, his piercing gray eyes locked onto me with intense calculating curiosity. My breath caught in my throat. This was the man who had screamed for me as I died. Yet looking at him now, there was no trace of that shattered vulnerability. He was the Ice King of the Harrington dynasty, observing a highly entertaining train wreck. "Arthur," I breathed, forcing my heart to steady. He took a slow drag of his cigar, the cherry glowing fiercely in the dark. "I have to admit, Miss Bennett, I anticipated a dreadfully boring evening. I certainly didn't expect you to publicly castrate my little brother and out his sordid affair with your stepsister in front of the entire eastern seaboard." "He deserved worse," I said simply. Arthur's eyebrow arched. He pushed off the balustrade and walked slowly toward me, stopping just a few feet away. The scent of tobacco cedar wood and something uniquely masculine enveloped me. "You've changed, Victoria," he observed, his voice dangerously soft. "Yesterday you looked at him like he hung the moon. Tonight you looked at him like he was dirt on your shoe." What brought about this sudden enlightenment? I couldn't tell him the truth. I couldn't tell him I remembered him holding my bleeding corpse. So I went with the next best thing, pure, unadulterated ambition. "I woke up," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I realized that marrying Liam would eventually ruin my family's legacy. He's weak, Arthur. He's greedy. And he's foolish. He wants the Bennett shipping lines to prop up his bid for the CEO seat at Harrington Global." Arthur's eyes narrowed. He knew exactly what the stakes were. His father, the ailing patriarch of Harrington Global, had set a mandate: whoever married into a strong, stable family and proved they could secure the company's future would take the throne. Liam thought he had it in the bag by marrying me. "He is." Arthur agreed, his voice dropping an octave. "So you dodged a bullet. Why are you out here in the cold instead of inside celebrating your narrow escape?" I took a step closer to him. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my voice remained steady. I needed an ally. I needed a shield. And more than that, I needed a sword to dismantle Liam completely. "Because dodging a bullet isn't enough," I whispered. "I want to break the gun that fired it." Arthur went perfectly still. You need a respectable wife to secure the CEO position. Arthur, I continued my words, tumbling out with desperate precision. Your father thinks you're too ruthless, too disconnected. You need the Bennett family backing to instantly overshadow Liam's claim. Are you offering yourself, Victoria? He asked, a dark, cynical amusement dancing in his eyes. A marriage of convenience, 5 minutes after dumping my brother. I'm offering you an empire, Arthur. Marry me. We take the company, we crush Liam, and we secure our futures. It's a purely transactional alliance. I don't want your heart, and you don't want mine. Arthur stared at me for a long, agonizing moment. The wind howled around us, whipping my silk dress against my legs. He took one final drag of his cigar, then crushed it out slowly in the stone ashtray beside him. When he looked back at me, the amusement was gone. In its place was a terrifying, brilliant hunger. Deal, Arthur said. The sheer velocity of Arthur's agreement left me momentarily stunned. I had prepared arguments, financial projections, and counter-offers, bracing for the infamous Harrington eldest son to dissect my proposal. Instead, he accepted with a single heavy word. Just like that, I asked, my voice betraying a hint of my surprise. Arthur took a step closer, towering over me. The moonlight caught the sharp edge of his jawline. I don't waste time, Victoria. You hold the Bennett shares. You clearly hate my brother enough to publicly humiliate him, which means you won't be a liability. And frankly, watching Liam's face when he realizes I've taken both the company and the woman he thought he had wrapped around his finger will be profoundly entertaining. He held out his hand. It was massive, calloused, and warm. I placed my freezing hand in his, feeling the electric shock of his grip. We announce it tomorrow. Arthur stated, his tone shifting into full corporate command mode. Tonight you go home with your father. Let the media feed on the cheating scandal. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., my PR team will release a statement that we are engaged. We frame your rejection of Liam not just as a reaction to his infidelity, but because you were already quietly involved with me. I blinked. That will make me look ruthless. Arthur's lips curved into a devastating, sharp smile. Good. If you're going to survive in my world, Victoria, you need to be feared, not pitied. He released my hand, turning back toward the terrace doors. I'll pick you up at your estate tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Wear something triumphant. With that, he vanished back into the chaos of the ballroom, leaving me alone in the cold. But for the first time since waking up in this timeline, I didn't feel the chill of the grave. I felt a raging fire. The next morning, the Bennett estate was a war zone. I sat at the massive oak dining table, calmly sipping black coffee, while my father paced the length of the room, his phone glued to his ear. The morning papers were scattered across the table, the headlines screaming in bold black ink. Bennett heiress dumps Harrington. Golden boy infidelity. Scandal rocks. Winter gala. Olivia was nowhere to be seen. My father had confined her to the guest house the moment we returned last night. He wasn't just angry about the betrayal. He was furious about the public spectacle. Robert, please. My father barked into the phone, slamming his hand on a mahogany side table. I don't care what Liam says, cancel the preliminary merger meetings. If that boy thinks he can humiliate my daughter and still get access to our shipping lanes, he is out of his goddamn mind. He hung up, running a hand through his graying hair, and turned to me. Victoria, sweetheart, are you holding up? I still can't believe. Olivia and Liam. I should have seen it. I'm fine, Dad. I said, smoothly setting my porcelain cup down. In fact, I've already secured a better path forward for the Bennett family. My father paused, his brow furrowing. What do you mean? Before I could answer our butler, Higgins appeared in the arched doorway, looking thoroughly bewildered. Sir, Miss Victoria, Arthur Harrington is here. He says he is expected. My father's jaw dropped. Arthur, what the hell does the exile want? He's here for me, Dad, I said, standing up and smoothing down the skirt of my tailored crimson Dior dress. We have an announcement to make. I walked out to the grand foyer. The massive front doors were open, and Arthur stood in the entryway looking like a dark god of war in a bespoke charcoal three-piece suit. He exuded an aura of absolute dominance that made the opulent surroundings of my family home seem suddenly small. Behind him, parked precisely in the center of the circular driveway, was a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom. Miss Bennett. Arthur greeted, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. Arthur, I replied, walking down the steps. My father rushed out behind me. Arthur Harrington. What is the meaning of this? If you are here to apologize for your brother's wretched behavior, I don't apologize for Liam's failures, Robert. Arthur cut in smoothly, his gaze never leaving mine. I capitalize on them. I am here to formally ask for your daughter's hand in marriage. Though strictly speaking, she has already agreed. My father looked as if he had been physically struck. What, Victoria, is this true? It is, I said, turning to my father. Arthur and I are getting married. It aligns our families perfectly, Dad. It secures the shipping contracts without giving Liam any power. Arthur will be the next CEO of Harrington Global, and our assets will be protected. My father stared at me, seeing the steel in my eyes. He was a businessman first and foremost. The shock slowly faded, replaced by a calculating gleam. He looked at Arthur, evaluating the undeniable power radiating from the man. It's a bold move, Victoria, my father finally said, a slow, approving smile creeping onto his face. A very bold move. We have a press conference at noon, Arthur said, checking his heavy Patek Philippe watch. If you're ready, Victoria, let's go. The ride to Harrington Global headquarters was swift. The sheer silence inside the Rolls-Royce allowed me to gather my thoughts. Arthur didn't attempt small talk, and I appreciated the silent professionalism. This was a business transaction. He was a means to an end, a weapon to wield against Liam. But as the car pulled up to the towering glass and steel skyscraper of Harrington Global, the reality of what I was doing hit me. A mob of paparazzi was swarming the entrance cameras, flashing relentlessly. Ready, Arthur asked, his voice low. Always, I replied. He stepped out first, immediately commanding the space. He turned and offered me his hand. I took it, stepping out into the blinding frenzy of flashes and shouted questions. Arthur didn't let go of my hand. He pulled my arm through his, tucking me close to his side. It was a protective, fiercely possessive gesture that completely threw me off guard. For a brief second, I remembered his desperate grip on my bleeding body in the past life. The phantom warmth of his tears. I pushed the memory down violently. Focus, I told myself. This is business. We made our way through the lobby flanked by Arthur's security team and stepped into the private executive elevator. As the doors chimed and opened on the top floor, we stepped out into the opulent executive suite. And there, standing in the center of the reception area, looking pale, disheveled, and manic, was Liam. Beside him stood his mother, Beatrice, her face pale with shock. Liam's bloodshot eyes locked onto my arm, inextricably linked with his brother's. his face contorted in a mixture of disbelief, betrayal, and unadulterated rage. "Victoria!" Liam hissed, taking a threatening step forward. "What the hell is this? What are you doing with him?" Arthur didn't even blink. He smoothly shifted his stance, placing himself slightly in front of me, a physical barrier between me and the man who had murdered me in another life. "Watch your tone, Liam," Arthur said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that sent shivers down my spine. "You are speaking to my fiancé." The word fiancé hung in the sterile, heavily air-conditioned air of the executive suite like a live grenade. For a terrifying, exhilarating second, Liam simply stopped breathing. The color drained from his face, leaving his golden boy complexion a sickly ashen gray. His mother Beatrice swayed on her feet, clutching her pristine Chanel pearl necklace, as if it were the only thing keeping her tethered to the earth. "Fiancé." Liam finally choked out the word, scraping violently against his vocal cords. He let out a breathless, unhinged laugh. "You're lying. You're trying to punish me. Victoria, I know you're hurt about Olivia, but this parading around with the exile, it's pathetic." He lunged forward, his hand reaching out to grab my shoulder. He never made it. Arthur moved with the terrifying speed of a striking viper. His large hand snapped out, catching Liam by the throat and slamming him backward against the frosted glass of the boardroom door. The heavy glass rattled dangerously in its frame. "I told you to watch your tone," Arthur murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, yet it commanded the entire room. He didn't look angry. He looked entirely, chillingly bored. "Touch her again, Liam, and I will shatter your wrist into so many pieces the surgeons at Johns Hopkins won't be able to put you back together." "Arthur, unhand your brother this instant," Beatrice shrieked, finally finding her voice. She rushed forward, her heels clicking frantically against the hardwood floor. Arthur held Liam for a second longer, letting the younger man struggle uselessly against his iron grip, before releasing him with a look of utter disgust. Liam collapsed against the door, gasping for air, rubbing his reddened throat. What in God's name is going on out here? The heavy mahogany doors to the inner office swung open, and the temperature in the room seemed to plummet another 10 degrees. Roman Harrington, the ruthless architect of the Harrington global empire, rolled his wheelchair over the threshold. He was a shadow of his former towering self, an oxygen tube resting under his nose, but his eyes, the exact same piercing, predatory gray as Arthur's, were sharp enough to draw blood. "Father," Arthur said, smoothing the cuffs of his Brioni suit, as if he hadn't just assaulted the golden child. "Victoria and I are here to finalize the transition of the Bennett shipping lanes." Roman's gaze shifted to me. It was like being appraised by a starving wolf. "I read the morning papers, Miss Bennett. You humiliated my son. And now you walk into my headquarters on the arm of my eldest. Explain yourself before I have security throw you both out onto Wall Street." "It's simple, Roman," I said, stepping out from behind Arthur. I squared my shoulders, ignoring Liam's venomous glare. "Liam proved himself to be a liability. The Bennett family does not merge its assets with volatile, easily compromised men who cannot even manage their own zipper, let alone a global logistics network. However, we still value the Harrington alliance. Therefore, my father and I have decided to back the stronger horse." I reached into my designer handbag and pulled out a thick, leather-bound portfolio. I walked over to Roman and dropped it onto his lap. "These are the exclusive shipping contracts with our Asian and European distribution hubs. 51% controlling interest in the maritime logistics network. They are fully executed, signed by my father this morning." I paused, letting my eyes flick to Liam, whose face was twisting in sheer horror. "The only stipulation is that the sole signatory on behalf of Harrington Global must be Arthur." Roman opened the portfolio with trembling, age-spotted hands. He scanned the legal jargon, his sharp eyes widening fractionally. He knew what he was holding. I was handing him the key to monopolizing the eastern seaboard shipping routes. "Father, you can't be considering this," Liam cried out, pushing himself off the glass door. "She's bluffing. They aren't together. They haven't spoken 2 words to each other before last night. It's a sham to steal my seat." Roman slowly closed the portfolio. He looked at Arthur, then at me. "Is it a sham, Arthur? Are you playing house with the Bennett heiress just to strong-arm your way into my chair?" Arthur stepped up to my side. He didn't hesitate. He wrapped his arm around my waist, his large hand resting firmly on my hip, pulling me flush against his side. The heat of his body seeped through my crimson Dior dress. "Victoria and I have been privately involved for 6 months. Father, Arthur lied with such effortless sociopathic conviction that even I almost believed him. Liam was a convenient smokescreen while I secured my operations in London. Why do you think Victoria finally severed ties with him so publicly? She was tired of waiting for me to return." Liam looked like he was going to vomit. Beatrice clutched her chest. "Prove it," Roman wheezed, tapping his cane against the floor. "You think I'll hand over the CEO title based on a piece of paper and a pretty lie the board needs stability? A public wedding, immediate integration. Our press conference announcing the engagement is in 10 minutes, Arthur stated coldly. "We wed in 4 weeks. Roman stared at them both for a long, agonizing minute. The ticking of the Cartier clock on the wall was the only sound in the room. Finally, the old patriarch's lips curled into a vicious, approving sneer. He hated weakness, and right now Liam was the weakest creature in the room. "Call PR," Roman barked to his trembling assistant, hovering in the background. "Get the board members on a conference call. Arthur, you get the corner office. Liam..." Roman looked at his youngest son with thinly veiled contempt. "Clear your desk. You're being reassigned to the distribution center in Newark until the scandal dies down." "Newark," Liam screamed, his voice cracking. But I didn't stay to watch his meltdown. Arthur steered me firmly out of the suite and toward the elevators that would take us down to the press room. As the elevator doors closed, cutting off Liam's frantic shouting, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. 6 months, I asked, looking up at Arthur. "You couldn't have said 6 weeks. Arthur looked down at me, his eyes dark and unreadable. "If you're going to sell a lie, Victoria, make it an expensive one." Before I could process the sudden shift in the air, Arthur's hand slid from my waist to the nape of my neck. His fingers tangled in the hair at the base of my skull. "The press is waiting," he murmured, his face dropping agonizingly close to mine. "We need to look convincing." And then he kissed me. It wasn't a tentative, performative peck. It was a claiming. His lips were firm, demanding, and utterly consuming. The taste of mint and dark coffee invaded my senses. I froze for a split second before my body, betraying every logical thought in my brain, melted against his solid chest. My hands instinctively gripped the lapels of his suit. When he finally pulled away, my lips were tingling and my mind was entirely blank. "Showtime, Miss Bennett." He whispered, his thumb brushing a smudge of lipstick from my lower lip. The elevator doors chimed open to a sea of flashing lights. I walked out beside the devil himself, and for the first time in 2 lifetimes, I felt entirely untouchable. 3 days later, the dust had refused to settle. The media was in an absolute frenzy. The golden couple narrative had been violently replaced by the billion-dollar betrayal. Arthur and I dominated the headlines, painted as the ultimate power couple who had masterminded a hostile takeover disguised as a romance. I was standing on the VIP floor of Bergdorf Goodman, surrounded by an ocean of ivory silk and French lace. My personal shopper, a terrified-looking woman named Genevieve, was holding up a stunning Vera Wang gown that easily cost more than a luxury sports car. "It's beautiful, Miss Bennett, don't you think?" Genevieve asked nervously. "It's too traditional," I replied coldly, sipping from a glass of sparkling water. "I need something sharper, less princess, more queen. Bring me the Vivienne Westwood." As Genevieve scurried away, a sharp, familiar laugh cut through the quiet luxury of the boutique. "Planning a wedding in 4 weeks. How wonderfully desperate, Victoria." I didn't even flinch. I slowly turned around. Olivia stood in the doorway of the private suite, looking like a discarded runway model. She was wearing a trench coat over oversized sunglasses, clearly trying to avoid the paparazzi that were currently hunting her for sport. The arrogance was still there, but the edges were frayed. She looked exhausted, her usual pristine makeup slightly smudged. "Olivia," I said, my voice as smooth as glass. "I'm surprised you showed your face in public. I assumed you were still hiding in my father's guest house." Olivia ripped off her sunglasses, her eyes flashing with venom. "Your father threw me out, cut off my allowance, froze my cards." "Yes, I advised him to do that," I replied calmly, walking over to a display of Van Cleef and Arpels diamond necklaces. "You slept with my fiancé. Did you expect a severance package?" "You planned this," she hissed, stepping into the room and invading my personal space. "You knew you set us up to look like fools so you could steal Arthur, and the CEO title. Liam told me everything. He said you were a cold, calculating bitch. Liam is an idiot," I countered, picking up a heavy diamond collar and letting it catch the light. "But he is right about one thing. I am calculating. Which is why you are currently standing here wearing last season's Prada, begging for scraps." Olivia's face twisted in rage. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a sleek black titanium card. "I don't need your scraps. Liam gave me his black Amex. He still loves me, Victoria. He's going to get his position back, and when he does, you and your terrifying new pet are going to be ruined." I actually laughed. It was a genuine harsh sound that startled even me. "Oh, Olivia, you really are tragically dense." I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen a few times, pulling up a direct feed to my father's banking division. "Liam didn't tell you Liam's accounts were tied to the Harrington Global Executive Trust, a trust that requires the signature of the sitting CEO to authorize unlimited credit." Olivia frowned, looking down at the black card in her hand. "What are you talking about?" "Arthur froze his accounts this morning." I smiled a slow, predatory grin. "Liam doesn't have a cent to his name right now. He's living in a corporate apartment in Newark, trying to figure out how to pay his own electric bill." The color rapidly drained from Olivia's face. "No, that's a lie. Go ahead," I gestured to the sales counter. "Try to buy something, a scarf, a pair of gloves. See what happens." She stared at me, sheer panic finally breaking through her arrogant facade. If Liam had no money, she had no money, and Olivia Mercer was incapable of surviving without money. "You ruined my life," she whispered, her voice trembling with actual tears this time. "No, Olivia." I stepped closer, dropping my voice to a lethal whisper. "You ruined your own life the moment you climbed into his bed. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see." I waved a hand to the towering security guard standing outside the suite. Frank, my stepsister, was just leaving. Please ensure she finds the service elevator. We wouldn't want the paparazzi out front to get a photo of her crying. As security escorted a sobbing Olivia out of the store, my phone buzzed in my hand. An unknown number. I answered it. Hello. Victoria, please don't hang up. It was Liam. His voice was hoarse, desperate, stripped of all the arrogance that had defined him in my past life. The sound of it sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated satisfaction through my veins. You have 10 seconds, Liam, I said, walking back to the sofa and sitting down. Victoria, please, you have to stop Arthur. He's dismantling my entire division. He's freezing my assets. He fired my entire team this morning. Liam sounded on the verge of a panic attack. I made a mistake, okay? It was a moment of weakness. Olivia threw herself at me. She manipulated me. She told me you didn't really love me, that you were just using me for the Harrington name. I was confused. My finger hovered over the record button on my screen. I pressed it. So you're saying Olivia seduced you? I asked, feigning a soft, questioning tone. That you didn't initiate it? Yes, exactly. Liam grasped at the lifeline like a drowning man. She's a parasite, Victoria. She's greedy, and she used me to get to the Bennett wealth. I never loved her. I love you. I always have. Please just call Arthur off. Tell him it was a misunderstanding. We can fix this. I'll dump Olivia today. I'll publicly ruin her if that's what you want. I smiled, my eyes gleaming with cold malice. Thank you for clarifying that, Liam. So, you'll talk to Arthur? He asked, a pathetic glimmer of hope in his voice. No, I replied flatly. But I will forward this audio recording to Olivia. I think she'll be very interested to hear how quickly you threw her under the bus. Wait, Victoria, no. I hung up the phone. I attached the audio file to a text message and sent it to Olivia's number. The snake had just bitten the rat. They would tear each other apart without me having to lift another finger. The Vivienne Westwood, Miss Bennett. Genevieve said, returning with a breathtaking architectural gown made of crimson silk. It's perfect, I said, putting my phone away. Bag it and send the bill to Arthur Harrington. The prenuptial agreement was the size of a telephone directory. We were seated in the hyper-modern conference room of Sullivan and Cromwell Arthur's legal team. The panoramic windows offered a sweeping view of the Manhattan skyline at sunset, painting the room in hues of blood orange and deep violet, Harrison Cole. Arthur's terrifyingly efficient lead counsel pushed the heavy document across the polished oak table toward me. As discussed, Miss Bennett, the terms are fairly standard for a merger of this magnitude. Harrison droned on, tapping his Mont Blanc pen against the paper. In the event of an amicable divorce after a period of 5 years, you retain all Bennett shipping assets, plus a 20% equity stake in Harrington Global's newly acquired European subsidiaries. In the event of a breach of contract there will be no divorce. Arthur interrupted, his voice cutting through the legal jargon like a scythe. I looked at him. He was sitting beside me, radiating an intense, quiet power. He had unbuttoned his suit jacket, looking entirely relaxed, but his eyes were fixed on the document with laser focus. Harrison cleared his throat. Of course, Mr. Harrington, but protocol dictates we prepare for all eventualities. Now, regarding the infidelity clause, Arthur reached across the table, took the Mont Blanc pen from Harrison's hand, and flipped to page 42. He drew a harsh, thick line through 2 entire paragraphs. I'm amending this, Arthur stated, his voice devoid of emotion. If I am unfaithful, Victoria does not get a payout. She gets everything. My shares, my liquid assets, my properties, the entirety of my net worth. Harrison's jaw actually dropped. "Sir, with respect, that is financial suicide. It is highly irregular." "Do it," Arthur commanded, not looking away from the paper. He initialed the crossed-out section and slid the document back to me. I stared at the black ink, my heart giving a strange, irregular thump. "Why would you do that, Arthur?" I asked quietly, ensuring the lawyers couldn't hear. "This is a business arrangement. You don't need to put a loaded gun to your own head to prove a point." Arthur turned his head, his gray eyes locking onto mine. The intensity in his gaze was suffocating. "Because I don't break my contracts, Victoria, and I want you to know exactly how much I value your loyalty. Sign it." I picked up the pen and signed my name on the dotted line, officially binding myself to the devil. Later that evening, my belongings were moved into Arthur's sprawling 3-story penthouse in Tribeca. It was exactly what I expected from him. Cold, immaculate, and utterly devoid of personal touch. Floor-to-ceiling windows, black marble floors, and sharp minimalist furniture. It looked more like a high-end art gallery than a home. "Your bedroom is down the hall to the left," Arthur said, pouring himself a glass of Lagavulin scotch at the built-in wet bar. "Mine is on the 2nd floor. The staff comes in at 8 a.m. If you need anything before, then you know where to find me." He was establishing the boundaries. Professional. Distant. A complete 180-degree shift from the man who had violently kissed me in front of the press 3 days ago. "Thank you," I said, feeling a sudden, strange pang of disappointment that I quickly crushed. I didn't want a real marriage. I wanted revenge. I retreated to my designated suite. It was enormous and luxurious, but sleep completely evaded me. My mind was racing, replaying the events of the past week. I had successfully altered my fate. Liam was ruined. Olivia was destitute. I was safe. So why did I feel so restless? Around 2 a.m., unable to stare at the ceiling any longer, I threw on a silk robe and decided to explore the penthouse. The massive space was silent, the city lights below offering the only illumination. I wandered past the kitchen and toward the rear of the 1st floor, where Arthur had mentioned his private study was located. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open softly. The study was a stark contrast to the rest of the penthouse. It was messy. Books were piled on the large mahogany desk. Blueprints were scattered across a drafting table, and empty coffee cups littered the sideboards. It looked like a room where a man actually lived, not just existed. Curiosity getting the better of me? I walked over to the desk. I knew I shouldn't be snooping, but Arthur was an enigma, and I needed to understand the weapon I was wielding. My eyes fell on a thick, leather-bound notebook sitting dead center on his desk. It wasn't a corporate ledger. The leather was worn, the pages slightly dog-eared. I hesitated, then reached out and flipped it open. My breath caught in my throat. The first page wasn't text. It was a sketch. A highly detailed charcoal sketch of a woman laughing, holding a champagne flute. It was me. My hands began to tremble as I turned the page. Another sketch. This one of me sitting on a park bench in Central Park reading a book. The date in the corner was from 2 years ago. Long before Liam and I were even engaged. I kept flipping, pages and pages of notes, observations. She prefers her coffee black when she's stressed. She bites the inside of her cheek when Robert talks down to her in board meetings. She is brilliant, but she hides it to stroke Liam's pathetic ego. This wasn't a business dossier. This was an obsession. I turned to the very last entry. It was dated the night of the winter gala. The night I died in my past life. The night I proposed to him in this one. The handwriting was jagged, completely different from his usual perfect script. It looked like it had been written by a man losing his mind. She walked away from him. She chose me. I don't care if it's for revenge. I don't care if she only sees me as a sword. I have waited in the dark for 4 years, watching him destroy her light. She is mine now. And God help anyone who tries to take her away again. I stared at the page, the blood roaring in my ears. Arthur's reaction in my past life. The way he had screamed, the way he had held my broken body. It wasn't random. He hadn't just been a bystander. He had loved me. He had loved me in silence for years while I blindly worshipped his brother. You shouldn't be in here. The voice came from the doorway, deep and rough with sleep. I spun around. Arthur was standing there wearing only a pair of dark sweatpants, his broad chest bare the moonlight, casting long shadows over the heavily muscled contours of his torso. His eyes dropped to the open notebook in my hands. The mask of the cold, calculated corporate king shattered in an instant. For the first time since I had met him, Arthur Harrington looked completely, utterly terrified. The silence in the study was so absolute, I could hear the erratic, violent thumping of my own pulse. The heavy leather notebook felt like a live wire in my hands. I looked from the chaotic, desperate handwriting on the page to the man standing in the doorway. Arthur's chest heaved. The impenetrable icy armor of the Harrington heir had completely dissolved, leaving behind something raw, dangerous, and incredibly vulnerable. He stepped into the room, his bare feet silent on the Persian rug. He didn't reach for the book. He didn't yell. He just stopped a few feet away, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered near his temple. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said, his voice a gravelly rasp. "You've been watching me," I whispered, the revelation washing over me in dizzying waves. "For years, Arthur. You drew these. You noticed my coffee. You knew about my father. Why?" Arthur closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. When he opened them, the storm in his gray irises was terrifying to behold. "Because you were the only real thing in a world built on lies, Victoria. From the moment you walked into the Harrington Annual Gala 4 years ago, before Liam even knew your name, I saw you. I saw the brilliant, sharp-edged woman hiding behind the polite society smile." He took a step closer, the sheer physical gravity of him pulling the air from my lungs. "I was going to approach you that night," he continued, a bitter, self-deprecating smile twisting his lips. "But my father summoned me to deal with a crisis in the London office. I was gone for 3 weeks, and when I came back, Liam had his claws in you. He saw me looking at you, Victoria. He knew exactly what he was doing. He pursued you not just for the Bennett ships, but because it was the one thing he knew I wanted." My stomach dropped. Liam hadn't just used me. He had weaponized me against his own brother. The cruelty of it was staggering. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why did you let me walk into that engagement in the past? I mean before. Because you looked at him like he was the sun," Arthur breathed, reaching up to gently cup my face. His thumb brushed along my cheekbone, his touch agonizingly tender for a man with such violent hands. "I would have torn the world apart for you, Victoria, but you were happy. Or at least I thought you were. I exiled myself to London because watching you marry him would have turned me into a monster. But then, you walked away. You walked out onto that terrace, and you offered me the very empire I was prepared to burn down." I stared up at him, the memory of my violent, bloody death flashing behind my eyes. the cracked marble, the cold floor, and Arthur dropping to his knees, screaming my name with a shattered soul. He hadn't just been mourning a sister-in-law. He had been mourning the love of his life, the transactional nature of our deal incinerated in that instant. This wasn't a business arrangement. This was destiny correcting a fatal error. I dropped the notebook onto the desk. I didn't step back. Instead, I leaned into his touch. "I'm not a sword anymore, Arthur," I whispered, looking up at him with absolute clarity. "I'm yours, for real, if you still want me." A low guttural groan tore from his throat. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me flush against his hard chest, and his mouth crashed down on mine. There was no cameras, no press, no performance. It was a desperate, ravenous collision of two people who had survived a nightmare to find each other. I kissed him back with equal ferocity, my hands running over the hot corded muscles of his shoulders. In his arms, the ghost of my past life finally found peace. We were no longer two masterminds playing a corporate game. We were two predators who had finally found our mate. But outside our fortress of glass and steel, a cornered rat was preparing to bite. 3 weeks later, the day of the wedding arrived. The media dubbed it the merger of the century. The ceremony was set at the Cathedral of St. Patrick with a guest list that read like the Forbes 500, the Astors, the Rockefellers' global dignitaries, and Wall Street titans. I sat in the opulent bridal suite at the Plaza Hotel, staring at my reflection in the gilded mirror. I wore the crimson Vivienne Westwood gown. I refused to wear white. I was a reborn woman. I was meant to wear the color of the fire I had walked through. My hair was swept up in an elegant sharp twist, pinned with vintage diamonds from the Bennett vault. "You look like a queen," Genevieve murmured, adjusting the dramatic train of the dress. "Thank you, Genevieve. Could you give me a moment alone?" I asked, needing a second of silence before the chaos began. She nodded and slipped out of the room, closing the heavy mahogany door behind her. The room fell silent, save for the faint muffled hum of Fifth Avenue traffic below. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. We had won. The shares were transferred. Roman Harrington had formally named Arthur the CEO of Harrington Global. Liam had been completely cut off his corporate credit, frozen his name erased from the executive letterhead. Click. The sound of the heavy deadbolt sliding into place shattered the quiet. My eyes snapped open. I turned around. Stepping out from the shadows of the adjoining dressing room was Liam. He looked horrific. The golden boy was gone. His tailored suit hung loosely on his frame. His face was unshaven, and his eyes were bloodshot and wild with a terrifying manic desperation. In his right hand he held a sleek black handgun. My blood ran cold. The phantom pain of my cracked skull from my past life throbbed at the base of my neck. But I didn't scream. I didn't cower. The Victoria who would have begged him for mercy died on a marble staircase. "Liam," I said, my voice eerily calm, resonating with glacial authority. "How did you get past Arthur's security? Money still talks, Victoria." Liam sneered, stepping closer, raising the barrel of the gun to point directly at my chest. "Even if I had to borrow it from some very unsavory people. Olivia pawned the last of her jewelry to bribe a catering manager. She's waiting in a car downstairs. Olivia," I laughed, a sharp, cold sound that clearly unsettled him. "You two truly are a match made in hell. She sells her baubles to fund your felonies." "Shut up," Liam barked, his hand trembling. "You took everything from me, my father, my company, my future, you and that psycho brother of mine. You think you can just humiliate me and walk away into the sunset. I didn't take anything that belonged to you, Liam, I said, slowly taking a step to the right toward the vanity. You embezzled from the Bennett Trust. Did you really think I didn't know about Apex Holdings, the shell corporation in the Caymans? Liam froze, his eyes widening in pure shock. How do you know about that? I know a lot of things, I said, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. I know you were funneling $3 million a quarter out of my family's maritime logistics funds. I know you plan to use that money to buy out the board and force Arthur out permanently. And I know that yesterday afternoon, Arthur's legal team handed a 500-page dossier detailing every single wire transfer to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the FBI. The color drained from his face entirely. The gun wavered in his hand. No, you're bluffing. The accounts are encrypted. Nothing is encrypted from Arthur. I smiled coldly. The feds aren't coming tomorrow, Liam. They're coming today, right now. Your little stunt sneaking in here just added armed kidnapping to your list of federal charges. Then I have nothing left to lose. Liam screamed, his finger tightening on the trigger. If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me. Arthur loves you. I saw the way he looks at you. Killing you will destroy him. He aimed the gun at my head. The exact same expression of cowardly malice crossed his face as the night he pushed me. But I was ready this time. Before he could pull the trigger, the heavy double doors of the bridal suite exploded inward in a shower of splintered mahogany and brass. Arthur didn't walk in. He tore into the room like a localized hurricane. He moved with a brutal, terrifying speed that defied his massive size. Liam spun around, startled by the crash, swinging the gun toward the door. He was too slow. Arthur's hand clamped down on Liam's wrist with a sickening crack. Liam shrieked in agony, the gun clattering uselessly to the marble floor. Without breaking stride, Arthur drove his fist into Liam's abdomen, folding the younger man in half before grabbing him by the throat and slamming him violently against the gilded mirror. The glass shattered outward in a spiderweb of silver shards. I warned you. Arthur roared, a sound of pure demonic fury that shook the chandelier above us. I told you what I would do if you ever touched her again. He drew his fist back to deliver a blow that would undoubtedly kill his brother. Arthur, stop, I commanded, stepping forward. Arthur's fist halted an inch from Liam's bloodied face. He was panting heavily. His eyes wild, the civilized billionaire, completely eclipsed by the lethal protector. He looked at me, his chest heaving under his tuxedo. Don't kill him, I said, softly walking over to Arthur and placing a gentle hand on his tense, coiled arm. Death is too easy for him. Let him live in a cage. As if on cue, the wail of police sirens pierced the air outside the Plaza Hotel. Heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. Harrison Cole stepped through the broken doorway, flanked by 4 armed FBI agents in tactical gear. Mr. Harrington, Harrison said, smoothly unfazed by the broken doors and the bleeding man against the wall. The federal warrants have been executed. They intercepted Olivia Mercer in the alleyway. She's already offering to testify against him in exchange for immunity. Arthur slowly lowered his fist. He dropped Liam to the floor like a piece of garbage. Liam curled into a pathetic ball, weeping, cradling his shattered wrist as the agents swarmed in to cuff him. Arthur didn't look at his brother. He turned to me, his hands gently framing my face, his thumbs frantically checking my skin for any sign of injury. Did he hurt you, Victoria? Are you all right? I'm perfect. I breathed, looking into the eyes of the man who had crossed lifetimes to save me. I reached up and straightened his silk bow tie. "But we have a wedding to get to, Mr. Harrington. It would be rude to keep the board of directors waiting." A slow, breathtaking smile broke across Arthur's face, melting away the violence. He leaned down and kissed me, a promise sealed in fire and blood. "Let's go claim our empire, Mrs. Harrington." The trial of Liam Harrington was the media spectacle of the decade. It took less than 6 months for the empire he thought he deserved to completely crush him. Olivia Mercer, true to her parasitic nature, took the witness stand and sang like a canary. She detailed every offshore account, every manipulated spreadsheet, and every illicit meeting. In her desperate bid to save herself, she gave the prosecution everything they needed. It didn't save her. While she avoided federal prison, my father ensured she was banished from high society forever. She was stripped of her trust fund, her designer wardrobe, and her surname. The last time the tabloids caught a glimpse of her, she was working as a hostess at a mid-tier restaurant in a strip mall in New Jersey, unrecognizable without her glam squad. Liam was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for massive corporate fraud, embezzlement, and attempted armed assault. Roman Harrington didn't even attend the sentencing. The old patriarch had washed his hands of his youngest son, focusing entirely on the skyrocketing profits Arthur was generating. As the judge handed down the sentence, I sat in the front row of the gallery, my hands securely engulfed in Arthur's. Liam turned around as the bailiffs grabbed his arms. His eyes found mine. There was no arrogance left, only hollow, pathetic terror. I didn't smile. I didn't sneer. I simply looked right through him, turning my head to whisper something in Arthur's ear, completely dismissing Liam's existence. That was the final fatal blow. To be entirely forgotten. A year later, on the anniversary of the day I died in my past life, Arthur and I stood on the balcony of our penthouse, looking out over the glittering Manhattan skyline. It was snowing soft white flakes drifting down into the city lights. The Bennett and Harrington empires were fully merged, an unstoppable monolith in global logistics. But the boardrooms and the billions were secondary to what I had found. Arthur stood behind me, his arms wrapped securely around my waist, his chin resting on the top of my head. The warmth of his solid chest shielded me from the December chill. "What are you thinking about?" His deep voice rumbled against my spine. I leaned back into him, covering his large hands with my own. "I was just thinking about how strange life is," I murmured. "How sometimes the universe has to break you completely just to put you exactly where you were always meant to be." I turned around in his arms, looking up into those striking gray eyes. They no longer held the coldness of the exile. They held nothing but absolute, unwavering devotion. "I was always going to find you, Victoria," Arthur said softly, brushing a snowflake from my cheek. "In this life or the next, you were always mine." I smiled, pulling him down for a kiss. He was right. I had been reborn, not for revenge, but for this. I had walked through hell, wished the devil well, and married the monster. And in doing so, I had found my heaven. The ultimate betrayal was met with the ultimate revenge. Victoria didn't just survive her tragic fate. She rewrote it, turning her greatest enemy into a stepping stone and claiming the heart of the most dangerous man in the city. Liam's greed led him to a prison cell, while Victoria and Arthur now rule the world from the top of the Harrington Empire. If you loved this intense, twist-filled story of rebirth and undeniable power, please hit that like button, share this video with your fellow drama lovers, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another epic tale. Let us know in the comments. What was your favorite moment of Victoria's revenge? See you in the next story.